let's talk about the finals. Did Dallas find something in game 4, or did Boston just suck, or both?
I think they found human nature, and Boston was terrible. But Milwaukee's others, I pointed out on my pod on Thursday, scores 3, 4, and 5 combined were scoring 28, I think, 0.7 points per game in games 1, 2, and 3. So the third leading scorer, fourth leading scorer, fifth leading scorer for Dallas. So that was combined almost 20 points less than the third, fourth, and fifth option for Boston. They did a better job. Probably, I think the lively thing is, and they've kind of given up on Gafford. And I was just impressed with Dallas in the night where they showed a lot of pride for a newer team. But I just don't know that you can ever get past knowing deep down you're going to have multiple more chances to close out a series, and the other team doesn't have that luxury. And I think that's what happens a lot.
Yeah, because I had heard from some people who were at the Dallas practice the day before, and they were like, zombies, dead men walking. And I was like, oh, because there's also ways that could go too, where it's the end of a series and the team's like, fuck this. But it's really hard to do that in the finals, and it's really hard to give up on winning a title. You know, you go into that one game at time mode. But I will say, so I'm gonna give you all my best game 4 Boston excuses.
Okay,
Ready?
I love it. Okay, let me get a pen.
Yeah, get a pen. Number 1, you mentioned, already got the game they needed. They came there to do a job to win one of the two. They just happened to win game 3. So there's one. Number 2, really good Dallas adjustments. And I think they stumbled into something in the second half that they then went deep on in game 2, which was the Derek Lively piece of it. There's an alarming Derek Lively, Al Horford stat I'm going to give you. Derek Lively, second half, game 3, 17 minutes, 6 points, 10 rebounds. Derek Lively, first half, game 4, 15 minutes, 6 points, 10 rebounds. Out of those 20 rebounds, 10 were offensive. So that's just 2 halves. You combine those together, he was 12 and 20 with 10 offensive rebounds. Here's Horford's stats. Game 3, second half, 19 minutes, 0 points, 4 rebounds. Game 4, first half, 15 minutes, 0 points, 3 rebounds. Now, there's 2 pieces to that. One is that I think Lively is actually a pretty special player. I've watched him in person now 5-6 times. This is like a really unusually good rookie that has completely vindicated their decision to throw away a season when they had Luka Doncic on their team.
Throw away a chance to get into the play-in and likely get smoked. I just think it needs to be framed.
We argued about it last year, though.
Yeah, but the whole reason they punted is because even if they got in, they knew they were like, what's the point of this?
I get it. But they also have one of the best 3 guys in the league. And I never like punting on, I have one of the best 3 guys in the league, but they did it. It worked out. Lively's really good. And I think first 2 games, he was running around like a chicken with his head cut off. And I think the finals were too big for him. And he looked terrible. And he was bowling into people. And he was just all over the place. And in game 3, something flipped. He settled down. The big picture thing, and this is excuse number 2, is the no Porzingis thing you really felt in the fourth quarter of game 3 and then game 4. Because the Celtics didn't have enough size. They were getting killed on the offensive glass, which really has not happened a lot with this team, with or without Porzingis. And it was alarming, right? So you could say dead legs Horford in game 4. That's another excuse, right? He's 38 years old. They played Wednesday night. Really gritty, tough game. Then they have to play 2 nights later. And Drew and Jalen were awful. That's the worst Drew Holiday game I've ever seen in person. So throw that away. They won 10 straight. They were due for a stinker, right? You win 10 in a row in the playoffs. That's incredible. They were due. And then the last piece, the human nature thing you talked about. You weren't expecting to win game 3, even though you thought you could and you wanted to. And I really thought the Celtics were going to win. Now it's game 4. Well, what happens if we win? Oh, party. Where's that going to be? Everybody kind of moves into, holy shit, what if we win? What's Friday night going to look like? And I don't care whether you're working for the team, you're coaching for it, you're playing for it. It's this weird thing that comes in where it's like, I don't want to jinx anything that's happening here. But what happens on Friday night if we win? And you start, and now if you're the players, you're like, should we go? Should we be in Dallas? Should we go somewhere else? The whole Celtics organization, like, well, where's the party going to be? We have to have somewhere if we win. We got to run out someplace. and your mind just drifts a little bit, whereas you're Dallas and you're Luka, and you just got punched in the face by everybody in the national media for 2 days, and they're in Rocky IV log cabin mode, and the Celtics are just a little bit drifting toward, and then I think you saw what happened. So out of those excuses, what's your favorite?
The last one. You could tell in this first quarter, they were out-rebounded. They were -10 in the first quarter rebounded, okay? And the Horford point is an awesome point because I think it's real and it shows up. And he's asked to do so much, even without Porzingis in the regular season, but to know how stretched out he is and all the different stuff that he's trying to do. And then when Tillman comes in, it's like this first guy in the entire real rotation now for Dallas, where it's like, oh my God, someone we can ignore. And I think I think Al is probably in that category a little bit in game 4 by design of like, maybe we just, he's the guy we sag off of. Like, remember how
they closed
well
on
Al
him really
shot
good
it.
though.
What's that?
They were closing on him really good, even when they were leaving. I thought Dallas, their defense, I just thought they had played Boston enough times that it was like, oh, the ball's swinging this way. There's Al. Just start charging at him now. He's got that weird little 3. It takes him a second. He's got that hitch. And they were kind of on him, even when it felt like he was open a couple times. But it was not a great Al Horford game.
I also think if you're watching film of certain things that were going wrong in game 3 before the big comeback, which again is so weird. It's just the Celtics this season. Like that's a perfect. And people thought I was kind of like ripping them after game 3 in the open, and it was just like, no, I'm just pointing out like why, like the rest of the country, if they haven't been watching and you're watching the NBA Finals, you get to see why this dominant statistical team is always met with this confusion and worry. Like, I don't know. And then like the clutch stat, I saw it. There was a Ringer piece that I was reading where it was kind of like, oh, for all of you people that had all this concern about the Celtics clutch stuff, it's like, okay, but can you call yourself clutch when your net rating is as good as theirs is, but they blew a 20-point lead and scored 2 points over 8 fucking minutes in game 3 of the NBA Finals? So now like they get credit for being clutch because they won the clutch game when Luka fouls out at 4:12. So when I think about how bad certain things were, whether it was Luka's defense on the perimeter in game 2, the Jalen dunk that he had where Luka didn't do anything in game 3.
Yeah.
Where I remember watching that one the next day and saw that clip. I was like, God damn, Luka, like you didn't even pretend to move on this one. Or that secondary cut off the Tatum drive where a lot of that is just watching the ball and watching the guy and losing track of the guy that you're assigned to just running past you, and Drew making some of those plays. If you're good enough to be in the NBA and you're sitting in a film session watching some of that stuff and you're like, you screwed this up, you like think how mad you would be. And you pointed out the info that you were getting, like, oh, zombies. And then they come out and play the best game ever and smoke the Celtics, hold them to their lowest point total for a half of any half all season long. And it kind of reminded me a bit of the Phoenix thing in that we probably assume a little too much about how willing guys are to mail it in. The 3-2-1 Cancun jokes all the time. Because like Phoenix is a perfect spot. Like that profile of that team going, all right, we're down 3-1. Like maybe this game 4 is going to get really ugly. And they were actually competitive in that game.
Yeah.
So I expect teams to compete unless there's a massive gap between the two teams. Dallas, this Boston thing is a bad matchup for Dallas. That will likely show itself again here at some point. But I don't feel like I'm just so impressed with who Dallas has been throughout the playoffs to beat OKC, to beat Minnesota, that I would expect something like this, Bill. I would expect some evidence of pride and a performance that, I didn't think they were going to beat anybody like that. But the game just got so ugly and got so away from them. I'm not sure what the stats of that game even mean.
Yeah, Horford had an interesting quote after the game when they asked him about what adjustments. It was either what adjustments do you have to make or whatever. And he's like, well, we didn't make any adjustments so far because we were winning. Dallas made adjustments. And I thought the two key adjustments for Dallas, one was Exum. I don't understand why he didn't play him in game 3. And Kid was just he played 11 guys in the first half. He was throwing shit against the wall. But even in game 3, Exum.
That's unbelievable. 11 guys in
11 guys in the finals. In a finals game, in your must-win game of the year. And you don't have 10 guys you can pick from. But Exum came in for 3 minutes. He can handle the ball a little bit, which I think really helps them because it's the team's so Luka Kyrie dependent. He's really the only other guy on the team that can like bring the ball up, maybe beat somebody off a dribble and drive and kick or anything. And then Kid just bailed on him and played Tim Hardaway, who was absolutely atrocious in game 3. Then he had a big garbage time in game 4. But I think they realized like, oh shit, we should play Exum. He's better defensively. He can at least handle the ball a little bit.
And
any
pace,
shot he makes is a bonus. Yeah, he can move, he can go. And then the other thing was Lively, which is clearly if the Celtics aren't going to have Porzingis, Lively's athleticism, his fire, his ability to crash the boards are real problems for this Boston team. So, yeah, they beat him in one game. But I was talking to my dad. I had brunch with my dad today, and we were talking about game 3. And it's like, all right, what if Luka doesn't foul out of that game? Do we win? Luka fouled out with 4 minutes left, and Dallas still almost win the game, right? And it felt like Boston had this first 2.5, 3 quarters of, oh, you think we don't have KP, so we're going to roll over tonight. No, it's actually the opposite. We're going to do this, and we're fired up. And Tatum was great in the first half. Jalen was unbelievable in the second half. And then they kind of held on down the stretch. But it's a 3-1 series that feels a tiny bit closer than that to me. And with that said, I wouldn't be surprised if Boston beat them by 35 in game 5.
But we don't see Boston, I don't think, that version of them in game 4 if they blow the lead in game 3. I just think all games,
right,
it's
you're
like
right.
chemistry, like all of it's connected. And so you can't. Now, the Dallas frustration for me would have been peak like game 2, going, okay, these 3 things happened. They had their stale offensive moment late. They didn't make threes. They were 6 of 30 at one point, and they were up 9 points. And I don't think maybe it was the vocal people. People seemed, I was surprised how many people were like actually really positive about Tatum's game in game 2. Maybe you and I were harsher because of stuff we were seeing live. Because I even went back and watched the fourth quarter. I was like, God, I can't believe how many people like just felt like his playmaking was so great.
No, but I think people are defensive of him now, that in a way that this is now morphed into a different conversation. So you're either, I am pro Tatum and think he's incredible, or I am a Tatum basher and there's no nuance anymore. And I thought what we did a week ago had nuance. We were just pointing out what we saw. He did some really good things. He also didn't look confident in a lot of ways offensively with the ball. And that's what both of us saw. We didn't like it.
Yeah, that's the part that I think is like, oh no. Like if you're the number 1 option, which he is, like that's not great. Like you're stuck. So whatever. It doesn't, who cares? We already did all that stuff. So the series probably should be 2-2, but
it feels like it should, would you say 2.5 to 1.5 is the right score for the series?
Maybe that's the better way to do it.
I don't think Boston should be tied in this series, but it feels like a 2.5, 1.5. Because Dallas didn't even have a fourth quarter lead in the first 3 games. So it's hard to say, oh, the series should be tied. But it feels like they're getting better and Boston's getting worse. I guess over the last 5 quarters at least is a valid concern.
Yeah, that's a 5-quarter sample. That's a convenient way of doing it. But now we don't know what to make of Porzingis, because I don't believe anybody when it comes to basketball injuries. I never believe.
Yeah, so why was he suited up for game 4, do you think?
I assume my baseline assumption, and it's not even team specific anymore, I just think everybody just fucks with everybody else now.
Because I thought they should have suited him up in game 3, even if he wasn't playing. Why not? What's the downside? So you're removing Jordan Walsh from the active roster to put, like, who cares? Put him on there and put a uniform on him and make them think he might come out, which I think is what they were trying to do in game 4. The other theory I heard was that Missoula felt like if they were up 10 with 2 minutes left, you put Porzingis out so he can get into the last game, which seems very trophy participation-ish to me. I don't know why that would be the reason. So I think they were fucking with him. I agree with you on that one. But do we see him in game 5 is the big question in game 5. Because they really need him. I don't think they can play Tillman again. I think that worked in game 3. I think Dallas figured out why it worked and they solved it. And now we can't see him again. And they need more size. They need rim protection and rebounding for whatever those non-Horford minutes, or need to go small with Tatum. Which, I mean, my dad and I had a serious conversation about, would you throw Keita out there for 3 minutes? And by the way, neither of us thought it was nuts.
Did you like the Keita minutes?
There's certain matchups where I don't mind Keita. I'm sorry. I don't mind him. You know,
Yeah.
if you're putting him in space and people are going through their legs, like, yeah, somebody's going to score on him. But if we need rim protection and rebounding, I kind of like him more than Luke Cornett.
Where are you right now? Give me
nervous.
You are nervous.
I'm more nervous than most. Yeah, because Luka's every one of these first halves has come out. We covered this in part one, and has just dropped huge points on them. And he seemed, I thought in game 4, again, Boston played terrible. But Luka is just really comfortable getting to his spots now. And if he's getting calls, like at game 4, I thought the refs were a little more Dallas friendly, which was predictable and predicted. And I thought Boston got jobbed on a couple calls. They would have lost by 32 instead of 38.
Yeah. You're not actually blaming the officials for game 4.
I'm not.
For the record.
I just thought
you found
Luka was
a couple
getting
calls you didn't like.
I didn't like a couple of the calls. I thought we could have lost by 32.
Grab some rebounds, make your layups.
Well,
stop
but that's
turning
the
the
thing.
ball over. Yeah.
So here's the number one thing that makes me feel good about game 5. I love Drew Holiday. I don't think he can play worse than he played in game 4. And he's my number one candidate to be awesome in game 5. I don't see him playing 2 shit games in a row. And I think he's going to be at a whole other crazy level because he just was he had like a Butterfingers game. He just couldn't make layups, couldn't make little floaters, was dropping passes that were going out of bounds. Even his defense was a little off. And I just think he's going to be better. And then Jalen had a weird game. He had a 2022 Jalen game. He didn't have the same, thought he was forcing it a tiny bit in the first half. I just think they're going to be a little more locked in. But KP is the big thing to me. I think they need 12 minutes from KP in game 5.
Question for you.
Yeah.
I have not missed a minute of the Stanley Cup final. I was really looking forward to this one. Was not thrilled when the Panthers were up 3-0 on my Oilers. And it's fun just being just an idiot who doesn't really know what he's watching and just enjoying the game.
Yeah.
And not thinking about anything I'm going to say because I don't really have anything worth saying.
Like Connor McDavid's legacy?
Yeah, but I also noticed that I'm guilty of what, say, LeBron does to viewership, right? When you look at the finals ratings and you go, how did we go from 17 million people watching the last version of the Warriors and Cavs? I think that was, I don't know if that was the average number, if it was the peak number, if the peak number is even more than that. And then you think of what the ratings are now, or I can't figure out, is it really that much lower just 6 years later? And you go, okay, the LeBron factor is that big of a deal. And here I am with the McDavid factor. Some would call it the Draisaitl factor because I'm a huge Draisaitl guy.
He's unbelievable.
Right.
He's unbelievable.
His vision, it's Reed Shepard-ish.
But he's also amazing defensively too. He's just ridiculous.
Right, but he's been a disappearing act for the first 3 games. And I don't think Skinner, most of the goals are Edmonton looks like the better team. They make a huge mistake and then it leads to a goal. So I didn't really think it was on Skinner. So the reason I set this whole thing up, also because if you had told me 20 years ago, there's going to be a moment where the Red Sox and Yankees are in town while you're in town and you're going to stay home and watch the Stanley Cup final instead of Red Sox Yankees, I would have never believed that was a scenario that would ever happen. But
that's what happens when you trade Mookie Betts for a below average starting catcher.
I cannot believe where I'm at right now with the Boston Red Sox. I felt guilty about it. I go, you're not even going to throw on Sox Yankees?
But when Henry did the whole, this team's an asset and we don't sell our assets, whatever, I felt vindicated for, by the way, I still have not watched an inning of baseball, even though I'm following what's going on of the Red Sox this year, because I'm not supporting these guys.
Wow. Okay. So big lead up, not unknown for me. Oilers dominate in game 4, much like the Mavs dominate in game 4. Would it be worth it just for you to be alive for something as historic to have both the Oilers and Mavs come back down 3-0? It's happened in hockey before. It's never happened in basketball. I know it'd be disappointing as a Celtics fan, but as a chronicler of historic moments in sports, would you be okay with it?
I would not. The answer is no. I think it's more realistic in hockey, though. Basketball, I think, unrealistic. Hockey, just so random and stupid. And there's been so many playoff series. It's one of the reasons I lost a little interest in hockey over the year, because sometimes you feel like that, that's how the series just ended. We were in double overtime and
We've never
somebody
talked
just
about
did
this.
a wrist shot and it bounced off two guys' shoulders. I was going to all those Kings games in 2014. It was unbelievable that they won all those rounds in a row with some of the 2012. They were the best team. 2014, they needed a lot of luck. I felt that way about the 2013 Bruins too. Hockey is just rips your soul out.
I think it's the most aggressive ending of anything in sports other than like cockfighting. Because you think you're in control. You've got the puck. You've controlled it in your offensive zone. They haven't had a sniff of their side of the ice. And just
stupid goal coming. You could feel it.
Right. And it just ricochets off some guy's skate whose head is turned.
Right.
And then it goes in. And then you're not even aware of it. And then you're at home and you're just like, your heart is completely ripped out of you. And that's why I actually think it's less likely in hockey because of the randomness. That there's no way that every break is going to go Edmonton's way 4 games in a row, right? Whereas Dallas, maybe unlocks some things. Maybe Luka's grown up. Maybe Kyrie, second time around in Boston, understands what's going on.
Wiser Kyrie. I just think it would be too hard for the Celtics not to have at least one more awesome 3-point shooting game. Like if you're going to really say, is this conceivable that they could blow a 3-0 lead?
Would you retire?
No.
What would you do though? I mean, because that would be a tough one for you.
I'd genuinely be worried about my dad's health because my dad might be too old for one of those moments. Us sitting, I was worried about him in the Miami Game 7, and that wasn't even the finals. But it is scary when you watch how easily Luka scored in Game 4. Right? You're just kind of helpless, right? Which is why they need Porzingis, because you put Porzingis in. At least for 6 minutes a half, somebody's around the rim with his hands up that you have to think about. And they didn't have, once the guys weren't rebounding or protecting the rim in the right ways, it became super easy for Dallas. Derek Lively, I love Derek Lively. I'm really impressed by him. He's not that good. He's not 20 rebounds in 2 quarters. Like, he's 20 years old. He shouldn't be doing that to them. So,
what I liked about it from Dallas, too, was like everybody was getting involved and everybody's kind of like having a fuck these guys kind of game.
Yeah. No, it's true. But there's a lot of good history the other way of these blowouts that ultimately mean nothing. I mean, the probably the best one was 2 years ago in Memphis. Remember, they beat Golden State by like 50, 55. So it was just and it was like, oh my God, is Golden State done? I remember being on text threads. Like, is that it? Did they just kind of end the Golden State run? And then Golden State ends up winning the title anyway. So there's been a few of these over the years. And I remember even my favorite team ever, and I'm so delighted I get to bring them into the podcast, the 86 Celtics. Game 5, Houston, Seachting Sampson fight. Jim Peterson comes in, wreaks havoc, and the Celtics blow Game 5 when it seemed like they had the title wrapped up. They come back Game 6 and blow them out. I think the thing to remember about Dallas is those role guys on the road, if it gets super hot around the collar, I don't know how many of those guys I trust. Like, do you trust those Derek Jones threes when they're in Boston? Do you trust Exum, who's going to play more in Game 5, just being left alone? Hey, Dante, knock yourself the fuck out from 24 with the crowd going nuts in like a second half of a must-win game. There's ways that they can shift pressure to some of these non-Kyrie Luka guys that I think could work for Boston. And I also I think Tatum's going to be better. Jalen's been so good the whole playoffs. Is he really going to play 2 shit games in a row? So I think they're going to show up tomorrow in a big way.
Golden State lost.
We'll see what happens with Luka.
39. That was 134-95. But they were already up 3-1 in the series. Maybe it's because the Warriors and the 3-1 jokes and whatever. But then they came back and closed it out. That was a series where I broke Verno's heart. Because I'd enjoyed the Memphis thing. The Memphis thing is a real thing. Whatever it is, it's just different. It feels different. You're watching a game in Memphis, and I want that back. I want that back for that fan base. Yeah. But the way those guys chirped and kind of, was like, you guys need a little bit more of a resume, I think, to be acting like that. But maybe that's just the Memphis experience.
Or any resume.
Where I was like, and everybody knows that I love Steph, so it wasn't like I've had a lot of opportunities where I've been rooting against him in his entire career. But that was a game 6 where I think I'd said at the pod, I was like, I hope they destroy them because of the way Memphis had acted in that home game. Yeah.
Wait, before we take a break, you never told me what you think's going to happen in Game 5 of the 2024 NBA Finals.
I don't know why. Like, I'm kind of waiting for the next stretch of threes that we saw in Game 1. I'm kind of just waiting for it. And I imagine it's probably happening in Game 5. But I think Luka's horrifying, man. And it's kind of funny because if you think at the start of part 1 of the pod today, and here we are, I know the issues. I'm with you. The things, like, we would all agree on the stuff you don't really like. And it is kind of a reminder, too, of how intently people are now watching Luka for the first time.
Yeah.
Because you're like, hey, look, I thought he complained more against OKC and Minnesota than he has in the NBA Finals.
And the Clippers.
I don't know if you...
Don't leave out the Clippers series.
That was in person, so I felt like my observation of that was totally distorted because I saw it in person, and in person it's even more ridiculous.
We talked about it on the pod.
Right.
I went to that one game with Rob Stone, and he's like, is Luka always like this? It was like one of those. He was just like, yap, 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 yap the whole time.
But Rick Carlisle was on with Chris Long on his podcast, and he said, he's like, if Luka's not the best player in the world, I don't know who is. I think there's probably another guy you could name.
Yeah.
Even if you want to pick Luka over Jokic, I don't think it should be presented in a way where you're going, I don't even know who the second guy is. But for all of the things about him that can be, and look, it's 6 months. It's the roommate theory. We're annoyed. We're annoyed with way more players right now than we're in love with them because we've been watching them nonstop since October. But he is capable of doing some pretty crazy shit. And there's a lot of times in a game where you're just like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do with him because he's getting whatever he wants.
And the zag now off of Game 4 was incredible defense by Luka. That's the hardest I've seen him work on that end. And it was like, he tried harder. There's no question. But Drew Holiday missed like 4 3-footers.
Here's what happens. When you don't play good defense and then you hold up in some switch against somebody because you guess right to the dribble side, and then they play the clip like 4 times throughout the broadcast going, oh, man. Like, you only have to do it a couple times. It's the new version of the Harden post defense recognition comment of every playoff game. It's like, this guy's out of position, lazy, doesn't fucking care, doesn't adjust to personnel, but he'll get caught in a post and he holds up because the guy misses the turnaround. You're like, he's a great post defender. You're like, yeah, because that's the priority now whenever I'm thinking about how to build a roster is who's a really good one-on-one post defender, because nobody does it anymore. So the newer version of this is bad defensive reputation and then has a couple possessions where he stays in front of a ball handler, and it's like all is fixed and the town rejoiced.
Well, I'll tell you this as we head to break. One of the many things I love about the finals, and you've heard me say this many times, is as the finals goes along, you trust people less and less and less. And usually you're down to 7 guys, maybe, by the end of this. My guess is Dallas is going to now be rolling with PJ, Jones, Gafford, Irving, Luka, Lively, Exum, and a whiff of Kleba. And that's it.
A whiff of Kleba.
A whiff of Kleba. Maybe Gafford starts the game, but he's out in like 4 minutes. Celtics.
Kleba's defense is a positive too.
Yeah. No, I there's weird plus minus stats with him, even though he didn't do that much, that they were better in situations on the floor. And then for the Celts, the starting 5, obviously, Hauser, Porzingis, and like half of Pritchard. Because if Pritchard sucks like he did in game 3 and in the first half of Game 4, I don't know if you can bring him back in the second half. To me, Pritchard is on a half by half basis now because he just hasn't played well.
Those are really tough minutes for them to survive defensively because it just becomes Pritchard season. Yeah. And if you look for it, and you'll see it in the first half, but I think if it's a tight game in Game 5, I'd imagine that's something Missoula's not going to want to, like, you're just going to have to extend the other guys.
But Boston's, they're going to have 2 adjustments. I will say one other thing, and then we're going to go break with Dallas, that this is a weird point but I think I might even said this after game 3. I thought Dallas spent so much time hunting for matchups with Luka. You know, they would chew up 10 seconds of the shot clock being like, oh, we got it. And then if this guy can come over, then Luka can have, and then by the time they got what they wanted, especially if they walked it up, there's like 7 seconds left in the shot clock. I thought in the fourth quarter, game 3, and then all game 4, they pushed faster. And sometimes they're like, you know what? Whoever's fucking guarding Luka, it doesn't matter. He'll just take that guy. They try to switch matchups sometimes, but there are other times where he was just like, all right, fine, I'll just take Jason Tatum. Fine, I'll just take Jaylen Brown. So I thought they were moving at a faster pace that I thought really helped them. And Exum really helps them with that. Exum, to me, if he plays like 28 minutes and hits a couple threes, that's a bad sign for the Celtics. But I would say for Dallas, Lively and Exum are the guys to watch. And for the Celtics, the Porzingis minutes, and honestly, Drew. I think Drew could have an awesome game 5 because it feels like Finals MVP is still in play too, right? Not that that would incentivize him in any way, but I could see a world where Drew is the best player in game 5.
I think Tatum's due. Although, look, his game 3 was terrific. You know, I know that it was the Jaylen Brown show in the second half, but Tatum was so good in the
His first half was fantastic.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But Brown,
I'm with you.
Whether it's the Derek White or to Drew 3, or excuse me, the Drew kicked at the Derek White 3 where Drew went baseline. I thought that play was huge. Do you want more game log from game 3? I'm going to stop talking.
Drew 38-1 on FanDuel. Jalen's minus 230. Tatum's plus 220. Luka is 14-1.